At first, she didn't tell anyone, not her parents, not her friends, not even herself, not really. Because how do you explain a diagnosis that feels like a betrayal? How do you say out loud, I don't know if I'm okay anymore, when everyone thinks you're the strong one? Emily Parker had built her life on being unstoppable, smart, efficient, in control. But when her body turned against her, she faced something even harder than the illness: the fear of being seen as weak. This isn't a story about giving in. It's about the quiet rebellion of telling the truth, about your pain, your limits, and the beautiful, messy, powerful things that happen when you finally stop pretending. Because sometimes the moment your world falls apart is the first time you're free to be real. But what Emily didn't know was this: her diagnosis wouldn't just change how she lived, it would change how others around her saw themselves. Emily Parker had always been the dependable one, the straight A student, the team leader, the friend who remembered birthdays and packed an extra snack for someone who forgot theirs. She didn't grow up with much, just her mom and little brother in a small town where success was measured in survival. But Emily had ambition and grit. She fought her way into a top university, paid her way through night shifts, and landed a dream job in tech before she turned 25. From the outside, she looked like she had it all. But behind the glowing screens and bulletproof smiles, there was a storm brewing. For nearly a year, her body had been sending quiet alarms. A numb fingertip here, a sudden wave of dizziness there. She blamed it on burnout, on caffeine. On the way, she sat at her desk, because in Emily's world, exhaustion was normal, worry was weakness, and asking for help, that just wasn't her style. Then came the morning she woke up and couldn't feel her left foot. It was as if her body had drawn a line, a quiet ultimatum: you can't outrun this anymore. She still didn't tell anyone, not at first. She smiled through it, limped quietly through the subway, and held her breath when people asked, "How are you?" Because how do you answer that when the truth terrifies even you? A week later, she sat in a neurologist's office, trying not to tremble as the doctor typed in silence. And when the diagnosis finally came, her first thought wasn't, "What does this mean?" It was, "Who am I now?" Multiple sclerosis. The words landed like a stone in her chest. 3 syllables. One future she hadn't planned for. Emily sat still in the sterile office, pretending to understand the diagrams, the percentages, the treatment options. But all she really heard was a single sentence echoing in her head: "This is permanent." The train ride home felt like a dream she couldn't wake up from. She stared out the window, watching people rush by, healthy, unaware, untouched, and for the first time in years, she felt small. At home, she collapsed onto the floor of her apartment, not from pain, from the unbearable pressure of holding everything in. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just sat there, legs folded beneath her, forehead on the rug, as the silence wrapped around her like a question. What now? The next morning, she did something strange. She didn't open her laptop. She didn't check Slack. She didn't pretend. Instead, she picked up a blank journal someone had gifted her years ago. It was still wrapped in plastic. She peeled it open, turned to the first page, and wrote 5 shaky words. "I don't know who I am." That was the turning point, not the diagnosis, but the honesty, the choice to stop pretending and start listening. She wasn't sure where that would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't hiding, and that simple act of truth, It would change everything. For the first few weeks, Emily barely left her apartment, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't know how to re enter the world without the armor she used to wear. She started writing each morning, not for anyone else, just to survive the weight of being honest with herself. She wrote about the fatigue, the brain fog, the fear of stairs. She wrote about how much she missed her old self, the one who could sprint for the train and stay up all night finishing projects. But somewhere in those messy pages, she started to see something else, a version of herself she'd never met. Quieter, softer, still strong, but in a different way. One afternoon, she posted a piece of that journal online. No photo, no filters, no hashtags, just words. Today I had to ask for help. I didn't like it, but I did it anyway. She closed her phone thinking no one would care. But the next morning, hundreds of comments. Not pity, not platitudes, resonance. People said, "Me too." People said, "I've never told anyone, but I'm sick too." People said, "Thank you for not pretending." That moment opened something inside her. Emily kept writing and sharing, not to be brave, but to be real. She created a blog just for people navigating invisible illnesses. No wellness hacks, no toxic positivity, just truth. Soon, it became a lifeline for others, a place where people could say, "I'm not okay," and not be fixed, just heard. And for Emily, each time she shared her truth, she reclaimed a piece of her identity. Not the old one she lost, but the new one she was building, day by day. But as her words began reaching thousands, so did the pressure, because now people were looking to her for answers, and she wasn't sure she had any. With every post, every comment, Emily felt more visible and more exposed. Some days it was empowering to be seen, to be real, to not wear the mask. But other days, it was like standing in the middle of a storm without an umbrella, because being honest didn't stop the pain. The flare-ups still came. There were days she dropped her toothbrush because her grip vanished. Nights she stared at the ceiling, afraid her legs wouldn't work the next morning. And then came the panel invitation. A national health tech conference had seen her writing and wanted her to speak on the realities of working with chronic illness. Emily froze. Her heart said yes, but her fear screamed louder. What if I freeze on stage? What if my speech slurs? What if I fall in front of everyone? She almost declined, but then she remembered a message she'd received just days before. It was from a teenage girl who wrote, "You make me feel less broken." So Emily said yes, not because she wasn't scared, but because someone else needed to see what courage actually looked like. The day of the event, her hands trembled as she held the mic. She wore a subtle brace on her left leg, visible, intentional, and she told the truth about fear, about fatigue, about showing up anyway. She didn't try to be inspirational. She tried to be real, and in doing so, she was. The room went quiet, not out of pity, but respect. People lined up afterward, not for autographs, but to say thank you. Thank you for giving us permission to be human, to not hide the limp, to not apologize for needing help. That night, as Emily sat alone in her hotel room, she looked at herself in the mirror. Same diagnosis, same uncertainty. But something had shifted. She smiled, not because the struggle was over, but because she was no longer hiding from it. Looking back, Emily doesn't romanticize any of it. The diagnosis didn't come with a silver lining. It came with uncertainty, grief, and loss. But it also came with truth, and truth, however raw, became her way home. Before all this, she thought strength meant endurance. Now she knows it means alignment with your body, with your limits, with your honesty. She no longer sees her illness as the thing that broke her. It was the thing that introduced her to the version of herself that didn't need to perform, the version that could say no, the version that could cry in public and not apologize for it, the version that could sit in silence and still be enough. What began as a diagnosis became something else entirely, an invitation to live without the mask, to stop chasing perfection and start practicing presence. She still has hard days, days where stairs feel like mountains, days where brain fog blurs everything. But even on those days, she tells the truth. And in that truth, she's found something unexpected: connection, courage, and a kind of beauty she never noticed before. The kind that only grows in the places we once tried to hide. Because maybe we're not meant to be unbreakable. Maybe we're meant to be real. If Emily's story stirred something in you, don't just scroll past it, honor it. Share this video with someone who's learning to live with their truth. Whether it's a diagnosis, a heartbreak, or a quiet battle no one sees. Leave a comment below. What's one mask you've been carrying that you're ready to put down? You never know who you might inspire just by being honest. And if you've ever felt like your story wasn't brave enough to be told, let this be your reminder. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. Subscribe to Able in every way for more real stories, for quiet courage, for the strength that lives in truth. We see you, we believe in you, and your story matters exactly as it is.